We've seen during the course that ethics is about what you should and you shouldn't do. And ethics is obviously very much something for an individual. What should I do and what shouldn't I do? But it's also something that companies, that organisations get involved with. And the idea is that an organisation can have a code of ethics to tell its stakeholders, this is what we believe. Now, there are various stakeholders who might be interested in that statement. This is what we believe, this is how we're going to treat you. So we'll have a look in more detail in a few minutes at people like customers, shareholders, employees, suppliers, lobby groups, and the local community. They all have an interest in what the organisation does. So, why do they have an interest? Because they are all affected by it. Remember, if something is illegal, you cannot do it. If something is unethical, you can do it. So you might affect all of these groups of stakeholders, even though perhaps you should not do it. So what kind of things would go in our corporate code of ethics? Now, if we are going to do a corporate code of ethics, then the idea is that we're trying to show all these other stakeholders what we believe in, hoping that means that they will be more likely to accept what we do. So if we say, this is the decision we've made, hopefully they'll accept it because they will know how we came to that decision. So, various bits and pieces. First of all, core principles. Not just commercial objectives. We are here to make a profit, particularly if you're a company, but also things like we are going to do it by not damaging the environment. We are going to do this by not, using chemicals that can pollute the rivers, the local river. We are a cosmetics company. We're going to develop products without testing things on animals. We are a supermarket. We're going to sell food, but not animals that have perhaps been grown in conditions that are not suitable for those animals. So, for example, we would not sell battery-raised chickens. So the idea is, to a certain extent, you're telling people, yes, we're here to make a profit. That's assuming it's a company. But also, this is what we believe. So when we are trying to make our profit, this is what we will not do. So often the core principles, they might well be things you will do, but they might just as easily be things that you promise you will not do. Financing. How are we going to raise money for our company? Now, without wanting to get too detailed about this, because you don't really need to know at this stage, when a company is declared bankrupt, there will be a certain amount of money left. There always is. Companies don't go completely bankrupt. They always have some cash that they can get through receivables or whatever. There's always some cash. Banks get it first. Shareholders come right at the very end. So there is an order in which people need to be paid, and the shareholders are at the very bottom. Now that means that I might well buy $1,000 worth of shares in a company expecting a dividend. Fair enough. Without me knowing, the company goes to the banks and borrows hundreds of millions of dollars. Now that means there is a potential chance I'm not going to get any of my money back. So shouldn't we tell people in advance, look, when we go and we're going to raise some money, we will always try and raise it through equity. We'll come to the shareholders. We should always try and raise it through debt. Or we should always try and have a balance so we always make sure there is enough money to pay the shareholders back. Because otherwise, I'm not being told everything that I need to know in order to decide whether to invest in that organisation or not. So where's the money going to come from? Now we talked about, different stakeholder groups, customers, suppliers, the local community, etc. But we didn't really talk about what we could do for them. So that's what we're going to do now. Customers. Customers might be interested in the minimum standards that they can expect. So what's the quality going to be like? They might also be interested in things like supply chain policies. The Fair Trade Organisation is a good example. In the UK supermarket, you will see there is a company called Fair Trade who will say, we have deliberately bought products and paid a fair price to our suppliers. Now, in effect, the supermarket is saying, we agree with that, because otherwise they wouldn't stock the products. Again, if you're a supermarket, I mentioned this earlier, you might also insist that your suppliers of food treat their animals properly. You might insist that people who grow your vegetables that you sell in your supermarket have grown them organically. You can insist on these things if you want to, and then customers know what you are doing. Suppliers. How will suppliers be treated? So, for example, as long as you deliver the products to us on time and they are what we wanted, we promise that we will pay you inside 30 days. So the idea is that we are saying to our suppliers that this is what we want, and in return we are saying this is what you're going to get. Now that could be a good thing because there might be very good suppliers out there and we want them to supply us rather than perhaps supplying somebody else. So we guarantee, look, you do what we want, we will do what you want. Employees. Notice what it says here. Employment practices. How much time will be given to employees for training? Something that may be very applicable to you. How much time will we give as a maximum for sick leave? What's our policy towards things like paternity leave? So in many countries, maternity leave is governed by law. When a woman leaves to have a child, how much time off she has to be given by the company. In most countries, paternity leave, there is a new baby, how much time does the father get given? That's very rarely set down in law, but a company could say in their code of ethics, perhaps we think that this is just as important for the father to spend time with a new baby, we will give them time off as well. Other companies may say they don't care. But again, code of ethics, this is telling people what we're going to do. The local community. Now, the example we've got here is things like unemployment. What happens if a single employer basically represents most of the employment for people in a particular town? There is one big factory. If the factory closes down, all the employees lose their jobs, which means they cannot spend money in local shops, so they close down. They cannot spend money in local restaurants, so they close down. Basically, if this factory closes, everything else in the town is going to close as well. Is that something that the company should bear in mind when they're trying to decide which factories to close and which to keep open? So again, the Code of Ethics says this is the way we're going to treat people. So local community, we will continue to support you or not. And finally, lobby groups. There are lots of lobby groups who look after specific interests. So a company might have to deal with lots of different lobby groups. One lobby group might be looking at what's your impact on air pollution. Another lobby group might be saying, what are you doing for your customers? A third lobby group might be saying, what are you doing as far as running a creche facility, running a baby care facility for your employees? Lots of people might be looking at different things. So lobby groups, we might be able to say, in general, this is what we want to be able to do. So in general, we want to be able to treat all people fairly. If they have a family, we want them still to be able to come to work. So to give people an idea of what might be going on. So a corporate code of ethics can be a very powerful device for telling suppliers, why should you deal with us? Customers, why should you buy from us? Employees, why should you work with us? Shareholders, why should you own our shares? So it can be a very powerful thing to have.